I've rewritten this post like 5 times already, mostly because I keep asking myself why I'm even telling this story. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's the weird kind of relief that comes when you finally say something out loud after keeping it buried for years. Or maybe I just want someone else to understand how easy it was to cross a line I once thought I'd never touch. My name isn't really William, but that's what I'll go with here. About 4 years ago, I got pulled deep into crypto. Not the casual. I bought some Bitcoin and forgot about it. Kind of deep. I mean the stay up until 4 a.m. watching candlestick charts kind of deep. The kind where you have 5 exchanges open, 3 Discord servers buzzing, and a dozen strangers on the internet yelling about the next 100x gem. At first, I was just another guy trying to catch a lucky trade. But the more time I spent watching those charts move, the more something started to bother me. Prices didn't behave the way I thought markets should behave. Coins with no real projects behind them would suddenly skyrocket overnight. Then, just as quickly, they'd collapse like someone pulled the floor out from under them. Everyone blamed whales. At the time, I thought that was just conspiracy talk. Rich traders moving markets sounded dramatic, but unrealistic. Then I started noticing patterns. The same usernames appearing before big moves. The same small coins getting sudden waves of hype on social media. The same strange timing between posts, volume spikes, and price explosions. Eventually I realized something uncomfortable. The market wasn't just chaotic. It was orchestrated. And once you see that, a dangerous thought creeps in. If other people are doing it, why shouldn't I? That thought didn't turn me into a criminal overnight. At least that's what I told myself back then. But it was the first crack in the wall. After that first realization, I told myself I was just observing the market more carefully. Nothing illegal about paying attention, right? But once you start seeing the patterns, you can't unsee them. I began tracking small-cap coins, the ones nobody serious touched. Tokens with maybe a few $100,000 in daily volume, scattered across smaller exchanges. Coins that looked dead most of the time, until suddenly they weren't. What fascinated me was how little it actually took to move them. One evening I tested something harmless. At least that's how I justified it. I bought about $3,000 worth of a tiny token that barely traded. The order book was thin, almost empty. My purchase alone moved the price up nearly 8%. 8%. Just from me. I remember staring at the chart and feeling this strange mix of excitement and unease. If I could move the price that easily, what could someone with more money do? That's when the idea stopped being theoretical. Not a joke. Not curiosity. But something else entirely. A plan forming in the back of my mind. For a few weeks after that experiment, I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. Markets move. Prices fluctuate. I had just happened to hit a thin order book at the right moment. That's what I told myself. But curiosity has a way of turning into research. Every night after work I started digging through charts. I wasn't trading much anymore, I was studying. I looked at dozens of tiny coins and marked the moments where the price suddenly exploded upward. Almost every time, the pattern was the same: quiet trading, then a sudden spike in buy orders, social media hype appearing minutes later, and finally a flood of late buyers chasing the move. Then came the crash. Over and over again. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. These moves weren't random pumps. They were coordinated. Someone was starting the fire and letting the crowd turn it into an inferno. And the more I analyzed it, the more a dangerous thought crept in. This didn't require genius. It required timing, a little money, and people willing to believe the hype. The first time I seriously considered doing it myself, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt ridiculous. I wasn't some Wall Street operator or crypto whale. I was just a guy with a decent computer, a trading account, and way too much time spent staring at charts. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel possible. The coins I had been studying were barely alive. Some of them had daily volumes under $50,000. That meant a coordinated push of even $20, $30K could light up the chart. Once the price started climbing, the algorithmic scanners would notice. Then the Telegram traders would notice. Then the moonshot hunters on Twitter would pile in. It was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline fumes. I started telling myself something that made it easier to sleep at night. I wasn't stealing from anyone. People chose to buy. People chose to sell. Markets were risky by nature. If someone chased a rising price without thinking, that was their decision. That was the lie I needed to believe. Once that mental barrier cracked, the whole thing shifted from a what if to a how would it work? That's when the planning started. I knew the basic formula already: accumulate quietly, create attention, trigger momentum, then exit before the crowd realized what was happening. Classic pump and dump. Simple in theory. Risky in practice. The hardest part wasn't buying the coin. It was doing it without making the chart look suspicious. So I spread my purchases across several days. Small orders, different times, different accounts. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to slowly build a position while the market stayed asleep. I also started watching the order book constantly. You'd be surprised how predictable people become when they trade tiny coins. The same sell walls appeared at the same price levels every day, like landmarks. Meanwhile, I was working on the other half of the plan: attention. Because in markets like this, price movement alone isn't enough. You need a story. And I was about to create one. The weird thing about crypto is that people don't just buy coins. They buy narratives. A token with no story is invisible. But give it a future, even a vague one, and suddenly people start imagining profits. So I started building the narrative before the price ever moved. I created a couple of fresh accounts on different platforms. Nothing fancy, just usernames that looked like normal traders. I joined smaller crypto discords and Telegram groups where people constantly searched for undiscovered gems. Then I began planting small comments. Nothing obvious like, "Buy this now." That would have been suspicious. Instead, it was subtle stuff. "Anyone else watching this project? Volume looks weird today. Heard the devs might release something soon." Most people ignored it, which was fine. The point wasn't instant hype. The point was familiarity. If people saw the name of the coin a few times before the price moved, it wouldn't feel random when it finally appeared on the charts. Looking back, that part bothers me the most. Not the trading. The manipulation of curiosity. By the time the story was floating around in a few small groups, I had already been accumulating the coin for about 10 days. Slowly. Painfully slowly. Every purchase had to look normal. If I'd placed one big order, the price would jump and attract attention too early. That would ruin the whole setup. So instead, I broke everything into tiny pieces, dozens of small buys spread across multiple accounts. Morning, afternoon, late night. Sometimes I'd stare at the order book for an hour just waiting for the right moment to slip in another order without pushing the price too much. It felt ridiculous at times. Like I was performing some strange financial surgery on a nearly dead market. But eventually something interesting happened. The supply started drying up. Sellers who had been sitting there for weeks slowly disappeared as my accounts absorbed their orders. The price barely moved, but the order book was getting thinner. Which meant one thing. When the push finally started, there wouldn't be much resistance. I picked a Tuesday night for the move. No special reason, except that crypto traders are weirdly active late in the evening. Charts get watched more closely when people are bored and scrolling. By then I had accumulated far more of the coin than I originally planned. Seeing the stack in my account felt surreal, like holding a pile of chips at a casino table I wasn't supposed to be sitting at. Around 9:40 p.m. I started. The first buy order was intentionally aggressive. I pushed straight through a few sell walls and forced the price up about 6% in a single minute. On a normal coin that wouldn't mean much, but on a tiny market like this, the chart suddenly looked alive. Then I paused. Volume notifications started appearing in some of the tracking bots people use. A couple minutes later, I hit it again. Another wave of buys from 2 different accounts. The price jumped again. That's when the first reaction appeared in one of the Telegram groups. Anyone seeing this? Once the chart started moving, everything accelerated faster than I expected. Within minutes, the price was up almost 15%. That was enough to trigger a few automated alerts on trading platforms. People who track sudden movers began noticing the coin. My phone started lighting up with notifications from the groups I had quietly planted earlier. Someone posted a screenshot of the chart. Another person asked if there was news. I remember sitting there, refreshing the screen every few seconds, watching strangers begin to do the work for me. Speculation spread instantly. Dev announcement? Partnership leak? Low cap gem waking up? And just like that, the narrative was alive. I added another round of buy orders to keep the momentum going. Nothing too large, just enough to keep the candles climbing. The chart started forming those long green bars that traders love to chase. That's when the real volume arrived. People who had never heard of the coin an hour earlier started piling in. And for the first time that night, I realized this might actually work. Everything was going smoothly, or so I thought, until about 30 minutes into the push. I noticed something in the order book that made my stomach twist. One of my fake accounts had accidentally overlapped with another, creating a huge visible buy that almost doubled the normal volume at that price. In other words, anyone watching could see a suspicious spike. Panic hit me for a moment. My plan relied on subtlety, on pretending this was natural market movement. Now it looked like a single entity was dumping money to pump the coin. I had 2 choices: pause and risk losing momentum, or push harder to cover the anomaly. Adrenaline won. I decided to buy aggressively from another account to make it seem like genuine market interest. It worked, but only barely. Some of the Telegram chatter turned skeptical. Who's behind these buys? Feels manipulated. A small knot of guilt started forming in my chest, but I shoved it aside. I had gone too far to stop now. The pump was fully underway. The price crossed 40% up within an hour. At that point the plan was simple: start selling slowly while the crowd kept buying. That was always the exit strategy. Pump the price, distribute into the hype, disappear before the fall. Simple on paper. But watching the chart in real time does strange things to your brain. Every minute the price climbed higher. 45%. 52%. At one point it even touched 60%. People in the chat groups were calling it the next breakout coin. Someone even posted a rocket emoji thread that kept getting longer. And that's where I made my first real mistake. Instead of selling immediately like I had planned, I hesitated. Greed is a quiet voice, but it's persuasive. It kept telling me the same thing: what if it goes higher? So I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The volume kept growing, strangers kept buying, and my unrealized profit kept climbing. For a moment I stopped feeling like the guy behind the curtain. I started feeling like a genius. Of course, it didn't last. The moment I finally started selling, panic spread faster than I expected. The first few sells were smooth, small amounts slipped out without much impact. But as I pushed larger chunks out, the thin order book couldn't handle it. Prices started dropping rapidly. And then the flood began. Traders who had been chasing the gem panicked when they saw the sudden dip. Sell orders cascaded. The green candles turned red almost instantly. Within minutes, the coin lost nearly half its peak value. All the hype I'd manufactured collapsed like a house of cards. I sat there frozen, watching it happen, heart pounding. The adrenaline and thrill I had felt just minutes ago had been replaced by something colder: dread. Comments in the groups shifted from excitement to accusations. Pump and dump! Scam alert! This coin is dead. The realization hit me hard. I hadn't just made money. I had caused chaos. And there was no hiding it. Once the price crashed, the adrenaline didn't fade, it flipped into pure anxiety. My brain kept replaying every step, the accumulation, the hype, the sudden surge, and now the collapse. I hadn't expected the emotional weight to hit this hard. People were angry. Furious, actually. Private messages, forum posts, and tweets started popping up. Some called it a scam. Some were begging for refunds, though obviously, I didn't owe anyone anything legally. But emotionally? Every message felt like a nail in my conscience. I tried to justify it. They chose to buy. It's a risk market. That line kept running in my head, but it sounded hollow. Even worse, I realized law enforcement and exchanges monitor unusual volume spikes. I double-checked my accounts, erased any direct ties where I could, and prayed that the digital footprints wouldn't lead back to me. That night I barely slept. The thrill of success had vanished, replaced by a creeping fear that I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. It was my first true taste of what guilt feels like in motion. In the days after the crash, I kept watching the fallout with a strange mix of relief and dread. The coin eventually stabilized at a fraction of its peak, and the conversations in the chat groups were full of anger, disappointment, and bitter complaints from people who bought too late. Seeing it all unfold made my stomach twist in ways I hadn't expected. I wasn't caught officially, but emotionally, it felt like a punishment on its own. Every phone notification felt like a potential exposure. Every headline about crypto scams made my heart race. I realized the harsh truth: skill in manipulating a market doesn't make you clever, it makes you dangerous. I had played with people's trust, curiosity, and hope, creating a story they believed in, and then pulled the rug out from under them. Profits are fleeting. The weight of what you've done lasts far longer. That lesson has been burned into me permanently. Years have passed since that night, yet I still replay it in my head. The thrill, the panic, the guilt, they never fully leave you. Looking back, I see that the real crime wasn't just the pump and dump itself. It was the subtle ways I manipulated curiosity, trust, and hope. I created a narrative people bought into, literally and figuratively, and then destroyed it. That isn't just illegal in some jurisdictions, it's morally corrosive. I've learned that the adrenaline of beating the system is temporary. The consequences, guilt, paranoia, sleepless nights, linger far longer than any gain. If I could warn anyone tempted to do something similar, the market doesn't just move charts. It moves people. And people feel. Profits fade. The weight of what you've done does not.